Hello everyone. In this tutorial, we are going to learn about method overloading in Java. But before learning about method overloading, you should know about what is a method, how to declare a method, and how to call a method. And I have covered all these points in a Java method video tutorial. And link I have mentioned in the description of this video. So first watch that video so that you can get a clear view about method overloading. Okay. As well as you can refer my notes that I have mentioned in a description of this video. It will be helpful for you. Okay. So method overloading is one of the most exciting and useful feature in Java. So what is it exactly and how it works, let's understand. But before that, let's consider these points that we are going to discuss. Okay. So first we are going to discuss about what is method overloading with real life example. Okay. And then we will see advantage of method overloading. And then we will discuss different ways to overload the method. And then we will see points to be remembered about method overloading. And at the end we will see one simple example. Okay. So let's begin. Let's think in old days we can withdraw cash through a bank only because at that time ATM machine was not available. But when ATM machine invented, that people started to withdrawing a cash through ATM machine also. So here the job of first method is withdraw cash through a bank and the job of second method is to withdraw cash through a ATM. So if we notice here, both the method which has the same name performing same task of withdrawing a cash, but the ways are different, that is the parameters are different. So having a same name of multiple methods with different parameters, and this concept is called as method overloading. Now let's take one more example. Now let's think programmatically. Okay. So think about a simple mobile phone, that is the old mobile phones. So old mobile phones support to send only text messages. That means we can send or receive only text message using old mobile phones, right? So here we can write like this. But later technology began to grow and mobile phones start supporting to send voice messages also. So here we need to create another method to add new functionality because we cannot modify the existing method. If existing method modified, then you will have to change at all the places where that method is used, and it will be lengthy and complicated. So instead of modifying or changing the existing method, it's better to create a new method, right? So here we can write like this. But later mobile phones start supporting to send MMS, that is multimedia message. So here we can write like this. So the first method is going to perform a task of sending text message. Similarly, the second method is going to perform a task of sending voice message. And the third method is going to perform a task of sending MMS. So all three methods are doing a same task, but functionalities are different because in each method we are adding extra functionality without replacing or changing existing one. That means we are overloading the existing method without replacing it. So if we notice here, all three methods have a same name, but the parameters of each method are different, and it's nothing but the method overloading. So basically the technical definition of method overloading is a concept in which a class has more than one method having a same name but different parameters. As we discussed earlier, we can withdraw a cash through a bank and we can withdraw a cash through a ATM also. So here in this scenario, both the methods doing the same job but the ways are different, that is behaviors are different. And in this case also, all three methods doing the same job, that is all three methods sending message but in a different ways. That means ways are different to send a message, that is behavior of each method is different. So in Java, method having a same name can behave differently, and it is possible only because of method overloading. So basically point is that method overloading help us to get different behavior with the same name of the method. Okay. Now let's think if method overloading concept is not available, then what will be the scenario? So if method overloading concept is not supported, then we will have to give a different name to all methods, such as we discussed in a previous example, to send a text message, we will have to create a method with different name. Similarly, to send a voice message, we will have to create a new method with a different name. Similarly, for a multimedia message, again we need to create a new method with a different name. Okay, so if we think all three methods doing the same job of sending message, but still why they having a different names? Okay, and due to this situation, things goes complex, because if in a future extra functionality will have to add, then each time you will have to create a new method with different name, and it will be complicated for a programmers to remember the name of all that methods, and hence program can become more complex. That means the complexity of program will increase. But in Java, the method overloading concept is available, and hence we can create multiple methods with same name. Okay, now let's take one more example. In C language, method overloading concept is not supported because C language is not object oriented programming language. That means in a C language there is no straightforward way to overload the method, and hence each method must be given unique name. Now listen carefully. In a C language, there is a method ABS, and the job of this method is to return absolute value of an integer. That means return the positive numbers. For example, suppose we have an integer number -8, then this method will return positive number 8. And if we pass any positive number, it return the same number. Similarly, there is one more method, and it's LABS method. And the job of this method is to return absolute value of long integer. And one more method is there, and it's FABS method, and the job of this method is to return absolute value of float. So all three methods are doing same thing. That means all three methods performing same task, and still all three methods have a different name. And due to such type of situation, we will have to remember the name of all methods, and this will make situation more complex. Okay, but this type of situation doesn't occur in Java because Java support method overloading, and in Java there is only one ABS method is used, and we just need to change parameters, and hence the programmers doesn't need to remember the name of each method, and hence it reduce complexity of programmers and code become more readable. And readable means code should be easily read and understood, and readability increase code quality. So basically the main advantage of method overloading is it improve code readability, and the second advantage is method overloading provide flexibility to programmers to call similar method even though parameters are different. So these are the advantage of method overloading. Now we are going to discuss about different ways to overload the method. So first let's understand the meaning of to overload the method. To overload the method means to continue the existing method to perform a same task, but the functionality, that is the way, should be different. So basically, if we have to overload the existing method in a program, then we need to follow some rules or ways, and using that ways we can overload the existing method. So there are two ways that we can use to overload the method in Java. So we can overload the method by changing number of parameters, and the second way is we can overload the method by changing data type. Okay, so first we are going to see how we can overload the method by changing number of parameters. Okay, now see here, this add method we have to overload in a program, and if we pass the same number of parameters that already existing method has, then compiler will raise an error and program won't compile, because at the time of method calling, Java compiler identify method that have to call based on a method signature, and method signature means name of method and number of parameters and their types. So basically when we call the method, then compiler identify a method based on method signature, and if compiler found two methods in a class with same name and same number of parameters, then compiler won't understand which method has to call, and hence compiler may raise an error. Now I am going to add one more parameter, and it's suppose int c. So here we have changed number of parameters. So the first add method take 2 number of parameters, and second add method take 3 number of parameters. And this method is called as overloaded method from existing method. So in this way we can overload the method by changing number of parameters. Now we are going to discuss about the second way. That means how we can overload the method by changing the data type. Okay. Now see here, first add method take 2 number of parameters, and second add method also take 2 number of parameters, right? But most important rule of method overloading is having same name but compulsory parameters should be different, right? But here in both the cases method name is same and number of parameters also same. But first add method take integer type of parameters, and the second add method takes float type of parameters. So question comes that does it valid way to overload the methods? So answer is yes, this is completely valid way to overload the method. In first add method, even though number of parameters are same but data types are different, and in a second method also has the same number of parameters but data types are different. So in both the methods have a same number of parameters but the data types are different. So we can overload the method having a same name with same number of parameters but different in data types. So in this way also we can overload the method by changing data type. And don't worry, I will explain both the ways practically, then you will clearly understand. Okay. Now let's discuss the points to be remembered about method overloading. Okay. So method overloading cannot be done by changing the return type of method. That means we cannot overload the method by changing return type. Okay. Now see here, both the methods have a same name and the number of parameters are also same, but the return types are different. So question comes that is it valid way to overload the method? So this is completely invalid, and in this case compiler will raise an error because in method overloading return type doesn't matter, because compiler identify method which has to call depend on method signature, that is depend on method name, number of parameters and their types, and the return type of method is not a part of method signature. Okay. The most important rule of method overloading is to overload the method must have different parameters. There is no rule of return type. So simply keep in mind, in a method overloading there is no relation with return type. So return type of method can be anything. Okay, and I will explain this point practically, then you will clearly understand. Okay. And the second point, access modifiers also not a part of method overloading. Okay. So basically access modifier and return type not a part of method overloading, but the method signature, that is the method name and parameters, play a very important role in method overloading. Now let's do it practically. So first we are going to see how method overloading work, and then we will see how overload the method by changing number of parameters, and then we will see how overload the method by changing data types. Now suppose we are going to create a mathematics program. So as per requirement our task is to add two integer values. Okay, and in Java to perform any task we need to create a method, right? Because method is a function used to perform a particular task, right? So here we have to create a class test. Now let's create a method having a name add value. Okay, so here void add value. Okay, and here we need to pass two parameters, right? So int p and int q. Okay, because we have to add two integer values, and here we can add system.out.println and here p plus q. Okay, So this method is going to perform addition of two integer values. Okay, now we need to call this method to get the result. And how to call a method we have already discussed in Java method tutorial. Okay, so let's create an object, and using that object we can call this method. Okay, so let's create an object inside a main method. So test and using that object we can call the method. So here test dot add value, and here we need to pass values that we have to add. Okay, so here suppose 5 and the second value is 10, and output here will be 15. Okay, so let's check it out. So let's run the code. Now see here the output is 15. Okay, so in this way we accomplish a task of adding two integer value. But later, that is in a future, as per requirement of client, we have to add three integer values. So for that, again we need to create a new method which will perform addition of three integer values. Okay, so here we will have to create a new method, and the name of method, suppose add three integer values. Okay, and here we need to pass three parameters because we have to perform addition of three integer values. So here int p, int q, and int r. Okay, and here we can add three integer values. So here system.out.println, and here p plus q plus r. If we notice here, first add value is going to perform addition of two integer values, and the second add value is going to perform addition of three integer values, right? So here task of both the methods are same, right? If both the methods are doing the same job, then why their name should be different, right? Instead of this, we can simply overload the existing method. So just remove this method from here, because we do not need to create a new method, because we are going to overload the existing method, and to overload the existing method we need to follow the rule. And the most important rule of method overloading is name of method should be same, but the number of parameters should be different. So here method name is add value, right? Now listen carefully. Now see here, if we pass same number of parameters that existing method has, then compiler will raise an error. Because when we execute the code, then this method get called, and compiler look for the method in a class that will match to these parameters, and compiler found two methods that are exactly same, then it will create ambiguity problem. That means compiler get confused which method has to be invoked, and if compiler doesn't understand, then compiler may raise an error and program won't compile. Okay, so here we need to pass different parameters. So here as per our requirement we have to pass three parameters because we have to perform addition of three integer values, right? So here just add int r. Okay, here we can add values. Okay, so system.out.println p plus q plus r. Okay, if we notice here, having more than one method in a class having the same name but different parameters is nothing but the method overloading. Okay, and here we need to call another method, that add value. Okay, and here we need to add three integer values that we have to add. Okay, so here suppose 5, 6, and then 2. And now let's run the code. Now see here, we got an expected output. Now see here, both the outputs are different even though the method name is same, right? That is, both the methods have a different behavior even though method name is same. So we can say that method overloading help us to get different behavior with the same name of the method. Okay. Now we are going to discuss about the ways that we can use to overload the method. So as we discussed earlier, first way is we can overload the method by changing number of parameters. Okay, now see here, first add value method has 2 number of parameters, second add value method has 3 number of parameters, and if we have to overload one more method, okay, so here compulsory we need to change the number of parameters. So here we are going to add one more parameter and in int s. Okay, so here all three methods are overloaded methods, right? So here this method take 2 number of parameters, this method take 3 number of parameters, and this method take 4 number of parameters. Okay, so basically we can overload the method by changing number of parameters. Okay, now let's call this method. Okay, so here test dot add, and here we need to pass 4 integer values, and suppose 2, 5, 7 and 8. Okay, so when we execute this code, then compiler get call this method and will invoke this method, and when compiler get call this method, then will invoke this method. Okay, and when compiler get call this method, then we'll invoke this method. Okay, and we will get the result. So basically Java compiler differentiate the method that have to invoke based on the number of parameters and their types. Now let's run the code. Okay, now see here we got an expected output. So in this way we can overload the method by changing number of parameters. Now we are going to discuss about how we can overload the method by changing data type of parameters. Okay, now see here, in a future if we have to add two float values, okay, so here we can write like this: void add value, and here we need to pass float type of parameters. Okay, so here suppose float p and float q. Okay, and here we can add p and q. Okay, now see here, this method take 2 number of parameters and this method also take 2 number of parameters. Okay, but here we have passed integer type of parameter and here we have passed the float type of parameters. Okay, so in both the methods the number of parameters are same but the data types are different. So in this way also we can overload the method by changing data type of parameters. Okay, now let's call this method. Okay, so here test dot add value. Okay, and here we need to pass float values. Okay, so here 1.1 f and here 1.2 f. Okay, now let's run the code. Now see here we got an expected output. Okay, so in this way we can overload the method by changing the data types of parameters. Now question comes that can we overload the method by changing return type of method? Okay, so let's check it out. So I'm going to copy this code and here I'm going to paste it. Okay, and here I'm going to change the return type. Okay, so here int. Okay, so here both the method have a same name. Okay, and the number of parameters are also same but the return types are different. Okay, now let's check it out, will it work or not. Okay, now let's run the code. Now see here compiler raise an error, the duplicate method add value in type test. Okay, that means we cannot overload the method by changing return type of method. Okay, that is return type is not a part of method overloading. So return type of method can be anything or different. So this is the basic of method overloading. Okay, and I hope you understand the concept of method overloading. Okay, now I'm going to end this session, so keep learning and thank you so much for watching.